If you're looking to become a psychologist, then let this be your guide. With this podcast at your side, you'll be on your way to being qualified. It's the Aspiring Psychologist Podcast with Dr Marianne Trent.
Hi, welcome along to the Aspiring Psychologist Podcast. I am Dr Marianne Trent and I am a qualified clinical psychologist. So what I love about doing the role that I do in supporting aspiring psychologists is the truly random and wide breadth of different expertise and experiences that you guys have as listeners. And today's podcast is a guest podcast episode with someone I'd connected with on LinkedIn. And they are at a much earlier stage of their psychology career and had wanted to ask me some questions. And I said, you know what? This would make a really good podcast episode because other people will likely want to know the answer to your questions too. So would you be up for coming on and asking me on the session? So the answer was yes, thankfully. And yeah, we had a slight glitch with the Wi-Fi for our guest today. And so I'm on camera, but the lovely Ben, we've got a photo. But yeah, if you're wanting to watch on YouTube, please do come along. It's Dr. Marianne Trent. Whilst you're there, click a few likes, make a few comments, and yeah, get chatty in the comments because that's always really nice to see. You can also, if you're not a fan of listening to podcasts, you can also access the back catalogue of these podcast episodes as blog articles too. To do that, you go to www.goodthinkingpsychology.co.uk/blog. I hope you find this episode really useful, and I will look forward to catching up with you on the other side. Hi, welcome along to Ben Munro, who's joining us for today's podcast episode.
Hi, hello.
Thank you so much. And this episode is going to be a little bit different to usual. So for those of you who have listened to episodes before, you might well have heard me say that I'm a big fan of LinkedIn. And I think Ben was like, well, I'm taking her for her word and I'm gonna connect with her. And yeah, we got chatting in the DMs on LinkedIn. And I was like, Ben, do you fancy coming on and being a guest on the podcast? And you were like, okay.
Yeah.
So to give a bit of context, Ben is a little earlier in his career than most people, well, all people we've had on the podcast so far, which I think is really, really exciting and shows us, what a diverse group of people we are reaching with this podcast. So Ben has told me that he is in his first year of A-levels at college. Is that right, Ben?
Yeah.
Brilliant. So it's exciting. It's bringing back all sorts of memories when I was doing my A-level psychology. Yeah, exciting times. How are you finding it?
It's good. Yeah, it's definitely much better than secondary school. Sort of a new independence and stuff. It's great, and obviously I'm studying psychology, biology, and maths, and that's like some of my three favourite subjects at GCSE. It's going really well, yeah.
Oh, good. So we had a little bit of crossover there. So I did biology and psychology. I thought about maths, but my favourite maths teacher wasn't doing the A-level syllabus. And I was like, well, no. I think I only got my A in maths because of my favourite maths teacher. So I'm going to give that a side swerve. Oh, and you did psychology GCSE, you said as well?
Yeah, I did, yeah. It's still quite, like nobody who I know who I didn't go to my school does it. So it's quite rare around where I'm from. But yeah, it's definitely different to the A-level. Lots less essays and stuff.
Yeah. So what's the dream? Where do you hope to get to? What do you want to do when you're I was going to say when you're all grown up, when you're a proper grown up, but frankly I still don't feel like a proper grown up. So yeah. What do you hope will be in your future career?
A DClin qualification, I guess, at the end of the day. but I want to help people is the end goal, I guess, no matter sort of what it ends up being, just helping people in general.
Brilliant. Well, I think that it's really exciting that you know that at this stage of your career, because it really helps you to like supercharge the direction that you want to go in, really. Whereas I only discovered or thought that I wanted to be a clinical psychologist pretty much during the last weeks of my undergraduate degree when I was already studying psychology. So, you've got this golden opportunity to really use this time as bonus time. And I guess, yeah, like I know that our purpose of our podcast today is for you to ask me lots of questions. But in your position, what I'd be doing is thinking about whether there's any work I could do even now at A-level years that is about developing my ability to work with some of the core and key groups that that clinical psychologists work with. So when I was your age, which sounds so patronizing, and I'm sorry I just said it, I was working in Boots at my weekends. But had I known that I wanted to be a psychologist, then I might well have looked to work with adults or, children, young people, older adults. I don't know, like some sort of care role or something that allowed me to get a really good head start on that, so that I was, hitting the ground running when I got to university, I guess.
Yeah, so I worked with the vaccination program for COVID, doing like sort of the behind the computer stuff, and that sort of helped me sort of get a more feel of working with patients and and other healthcare professionals like nurses and all sorts. Yeah, really good experience.
Yeah, very good. Lovely. So, you have got some questions for me. Do you want to fire away?
Yeah. So first off, I guess, what's sort of your day-to-day, like day in, day out, an average day for you? What does that look like? 9 to 5.
Okay. Do you want the answer now that I'm in self-employment, or do you want the answer as when I was an NHS psychologist, or do you want two answers?
Bit of both. Go on.
A bit of both. Okay, so I'll give you an idea of what my NHS role was like. So my most recent NHS role was working with working age adults in sort of community mental health team. Let me give you an idea. Let me try and pick an average day. So I had what's called a job plan, which I had brought with me, the kind of idea of a job plan from a previous service that I worked with. So my weeks always looked pretty identical in terms of content. So it meant that I knew where my client bookings were going to be because I had to book the rooms in advance. So if I, for example, pick a Tuesday, so I was peripatetic, which means that I worked out a number of different bases. So I had one key base, but I found myself, when I was 4 days a week, I was actually in, I think, 5 different bases. So it was really frenetic, but I was really keen to be able to deliver the 50% face-to-face that the service wanted of that grade of staff. And people even told me, it's not possible, you can't do it. And I was like, well, that's what I've been recruited to do. I'm gonna blooming well go out there and do it. So my average Tuesday, when I was working most recently, I was using the outpatients department of a psychiatric hospital, and I would break my days down into clinics. So on a Tuesday morning, for example, I would see 3 clients. I would see a client at 9, a client at 10, and a client at 11, which meant that come 10 to 12, I just then had to write notes and then I was done, and I could go and have some lunch and then head off to a different base. So those clients that I was seeing, initially we were doing just waiting list clients, so people that I was doing interventions for that had come to the top of the waiting list for trauma predominantly. But after a while, I began to think we need a group in this service to try and teach some of the stuff that we'd usually do one-to-one, so that it speeds up people's access to the service. And so, often when you're in NHS or employed services, groups take up a whole morning. And I was like, well, that's not going to help the waiting list. That's going to make it worse, in effect. And so I said, I want to use one of my existing client sessions, but make that like a one-to-many model, make it a group. So do a whole group within an hour. And so that's what I did. Before I left the service, I'd done that twice. So we'd done a pilot and then we'd done the whole group. So it's slightly shorter as a 50-minute session, but actually in terms of the amount of information we were able to impart and the amount of people we were able to serve within that, it was really useful. And so, I pride myself as thinking outside the box a little bit. And then in the afternoon, on a Tuesday, I think it was largely admin time and supervision. So supervision for myself, which is obviously very important, but also supervision for any aspiring psychologists, so either trainees or assistants or honorary assistants. But also a bit of time to connect with the team as well in the shared office. So was that a useful whistle-stop tour of an NHS day, Ben?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's much more than I thought would go on to.
Yeah, I'm quite productive.
Yeah.
I'm quite productive. Have you got any questions or, things that have been triggered for you when hearing that?
I guess sort of what are the different challenges of working with, obviously you said working adults, but like all different sorts of patients, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, for me, one of the main challenges was that I was doing the bulk of the assessments. I love doing assessments. I find it a real privilege. I was doing the bulk of the assessments because they were predictable and they're routine. People knew when to book those into my diary. So I would do an assessment on a Friday morning, and I think I'd also do an assessment on a Monday afternoon. It's a couple of years ago now, but Monday afternoon. And so there was 2 slots where people could book in for assessments. But for me, one of the main challenges was that I could really connect with people and could really see that they were in need of the service, and more than that they were going to be a good fit for what we had and were going to respond well to our treatment. So I always used the assessment sessions to kind of give a flavour of the work and to check that they were able to engage with it. And so for me, knowing that these people were there, they weren't just names on the list to me. They were people with stories and lives and loves and things that mattered and things that were hurting them. So for me, the biggest challenge was that people were having a wait for that service. And also that sometimes by the time people got to the top of the waiting list, they would disengage, or there would be what we call DNA, so did not attend sessions. And it's just, yeah, it's tricky. But, when you pick up a client that just starts flying and does really well and does come regularly, it's just golden stuff. It's a real privilege.
That sounds like something that I would be interested in, like working with like one-to-one sort of with patients, and like every week or every so often, sort of seeing that progression. That was something that I'd like to do, I think. What's the work-life balance like, sort of, in the NHS, I guess?
In the NHS, for me, it was much better when I went part-time. So I've got 2 children, which you might well know if you listen to the podcast. When I was first qualified, I was driving 25 miles each way through sort of heavy traffic. So before I had children, I worked 9 till 5, and so I was out of the house, from 10 to 8 until 10 past 6. And that's that's a lot 5 days a week, as well as obviously the exhaustion of if there's traffic and stuff. But I've always been a real fan of lunch breaks. I've always taken my break, and always taken time to have that away from my desk and to encourage my team to do that with me. And so that's something that's been really, really lovely, actually, and really for me helps with the work-life balance. So either strolling out to like the local shop or the local deli, or eating together and then having a quick stroll, or just sitting in sort of communal staff areas and just chatting and connecting and, forming, norming and, storming in terms of what we do with teamwork. So yeah, I think very fondly of my time in the NHS services that I've worked in. But it is tricky,
Yeah.
there's a big job. And, I think we need to make sure that we've got stuff going on outside of work, that this isn't all
Yeah.
we do. It's tricky because, I absolutely think of myself as being Marianne, but part of my identity is that I'm a psychologist. And so when I first met my husband, he was like, "Why don't you do more? Why haven't you got more hobbies?" And I was like, "I don't know, I'm just kind of fulfilled." Like I go do a bit of Pilates and, spend time with my friends, and that's enough for me because I'm already fulfilled by my work. So, that might sound
Yeah.
a bit weird, but that's how it is for me.
Yeah, I suppose if you enjoy what you do, it's not work, is it? Yeah.
In terms of what I do in private practice, so I very much kept the clinic model. So I do on a Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday morning, I see 3 clients, and I wanted to keep it at that. So that tends to be as many clients as I see in a whole week. So yeah, I'm done by lunchtime, but I use the afternoons to write for the media, or to edit podcasts, or to work on books and courses and projects. So I'm definitely not sitting around twiddling my thumbs. And on a Monday and a Friday, so I've definitely got better work-life balance now that I'm self-employed. So on a Monday tends to be a bit of a quieter day for me, where I can get through some of the admin and the bits and pieces. On a Friday morning, I tend to do podcasts. On a Friday morning, I also go out to personal training as well. But yeah, I do media coaching, and I love my life, actually. So yeah, there's always articles that I'm being asked to write or that I pitch for. So yeah, I keep myself very busy and try and diversify my portfolio so that I'm not getting burned out or kind of strung out in any particular area.
Yeah. What would you say are the key skills to do sort of a job like being a clinical psychologist? What sort of skills should I be developing now before I get to?
Yeah, good question. Probably they're ones that are pretty tricky to measure, really. But I think it's the ability to have empathy, to be moved by the distress of others, but not in such a way that you're panicking or you're kind of brought into the chaos as well. But, sounds really silly. Why is this the first thing that comes to me? But long before I was a psychologist, I was reading magazines like That's Life, which you might not have even heard of. But I really liked those kind of weekly magazines that have got human interest case studies in. And like I said, it does sound pretty silly now I think about it, but it gave me a really useful first-hand insight, first-hand as much as magazine articles can, but a first-hand insight into the kind of inner thoughts and feelings of real people, and to a variety of presentations and things that had happened. So the first time I'd read or been aware of people who'd been sexually abused as children was via that sort of magazine. And so I felt like that gave me a really useful head start in terms of empathy and in terms of the wide array of things that we need to have some knowledge or experience of in clinical psychology. So absolutely doesn't matter. I often I will say to clients, I'm really sorry, I've not heard of that before. Could you tell me a bit about that and what that's like for you? But it does help if you've either worked with people in a specific presentation, or if you've got some knowledge of that, because I think people do feel a bit more at ease, like you understand their position, and so they feel seen and heard and validated, and I guess empowered. They're hopeful as well. So
Yeah.
that's probably a rubbish answer, go to supermarket and buy some magazines, but just try to get on board with some of the ideas that your future clients might be struggling with. That might be a really rubbish answer, Ben.
No, I think it's good. It sort of falls into my next question quite nice, actually. What books would you recommend I sort of be reading, and sort of types of books and stuff like that?
Yeah. So I'd be remiss of me not to say the Aspiring Psychologist Collective and the Clinical Psychologist Collective. Of course, those are must-reads for any aspiring psychologist. But I would read a wide array of books, including autobiographies. So I recently really enjoyed Michelle Obama's autobiography, where she talks about she really reflects on her intersectionality and how she was able to achieve the things that she achieved even before she met her husband, and what greatness they achieved, but how it was really important for her to to connect to unique things that she wanted to achieve, and she wanted youth specifically to be in a better position when they left office than when they entered it. And so just reading widely, really, and asking questions, reading things that evoke conversations for you. So I really like the works of Irvin Yalom, Irvin Yalom, Yalom. So his but my favorite book of his is Love's Executioner, and within that he's very honest as he talks about some of his different clients that he's worked with and the journeys they've made, but also his own kind of personal reflections on what it's like to be their therapist. Another really nice book by him, which is called Staring at the Sun, and that's all about people with death anxiety and working with not even necessarily all older adults, but people that are considering for whatever reason their own mortality, and I just really like his style of writing. So for anyone who's probably at any stage of their psychology career, but certainly at the stage that you're at, I think it's a sort of book that you can read now with the understanding that you've got now, but as you progress through your career, pick it up again and read it again, because you'll get more in a different way from it once you've got different thoughts, experiences and reflections to draw upon.
Yeah, that sounds. I'll give that a look. Sort of my next question would be, what sort of opportunities are there for progression, like through the NHS? You might not know. I suppose it's being like private nowadays, but going like through up the NHS ladder, I guess.
Yeah, good question. So before I started training, I was a band 4 assistant psychologist, and then I got on to training, which was a band 6 trainee clinical psychologist role, and then you qualify at band 7. I actually left my band 7 post, even though I adored it, and even though I'm still in contact with some of the people I worked with there on an almost daily basis. We've got a WhatsApp group, and they were just lovely, just my tribe. But they didn't have any at that time. They didn't have any progression roles available, and so when I qualified, we were quite fresh out of so actually, when I qualified, there were no qualified jobs around because you don't know how much you know about mid noughties financial culture, but in 2008 there was a big crash due to mortgages and things and Northern Rock and all of that jazz.
Yeah.
And it meant that there was a recession when I graduated 2011, and there were literally, by the time we graduated, there was only 2 out of 16 of us on my cohort who had jobs, and so there wasn't much funding. I think there were being cuts made to funding places for training for the doctorate as well. So by the time I finished, I think my cohort had been reduced to 10 for new people coming on for my course, whereas during training I was 15, one of 15. And then I think the following year they'd increased it to 17. And then I think it might have gone up slightly again. But by the time I finished, it had crept down for the new uptake to 10, which is a lot smaller. So there just wasn't that level of focus on the importance of mental health and funding it, which is really unfortunate, actually. And I don't think the same thing will happen again, with any future recession. Some people are saying, well, there's been a bit of growth in the economy in the last quarter, so that means technically we can't be in recession. But I think we're still thinking that some element of recession is likely, especially with the cost of living crisis. And so I would hope that there won't be cuts in mental health funding, and actually the opposite would be true this time.
Yeah.
I've forgotten your question. Did I answer it? I can't even remember.
Yeah. What do you think the progression, or maybe not progression, I don't know.
Oh yeah, it was. Let me come back to that bit of question then. So, I left the band 7 position I was in because, as much as they loved me and my work, and I loved them and the work, there wasn't that progression opportunity at that time, and so I moved on to an 8A, which was actually closer to home. So it wasn't all bad at all, and I learned many things and made lovely connections there too. But when it came to thinking about 8B, there were opportunities, and I had been interviewed for 8B opportunities. But at the time, I think they've changed it since. At the time, if you, even if you were part-time, when you did a band above, you had to pay full pension contributions, even though I was only part-time. And so I actually would have been worse off for more responsibility. So for me, that wasn't really what I wanted to be doing. I didn't want to work harder for less money. And whilst it isn't all about the money, it sure does help make things a bit easier to organize in your life. So there are progression opportunities, and I've got friends working in 8B roles. I don't know if I've yet got anyone working. I think I did have a friend working in 8C, but she moved roles, and I think went back down to 8B at some point. So there is progression, but it's not really something that I was that passionate about, to be honest.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
I love client work, you see, and the further and further up you go, the less and less client work you tend to do, and I love it.
What do you think? So obviously now going private, is it how much different is your experience like working with clients?
So it is different. I'd say the most similarities are health insurance funded work. So that's when it most feels like the NHS work. And by that, I mean people that work for organisations that fund healthcare for their employees. So there's a number of large employees in the UK that you might not even realise fund health cover for their employees. And I'd say that's the work that most feels similar to the NHS. You get people that are really motivated, especially if they're self-funding. It's different. It's different, but still humans, and we've still all been raised in ways that give us experiences that are not ideal and give us ideas about ourselves. And it's still about spreading the value and importance of compassion and self-compassion to compassion to others, compassion to self, and yeah, seeing what I can do to help people work through grief, depression, and trauma. So, you know, my work hasn't changed massively. It's just that I've cut out all the levels of bureaucracy and all the meetings about meetings about meetings. And so I'm able to get my feet on the ground and help people at the point that they need it, which feels like a real luxury compared to a couple of years wait on a waiting list.
Yeah. That answers my question perfectly, I think. So in between the sort of point where I am now and getting qualified, do you think the system will have changed with mental health? Obviously, it's a growing field, more attention in the media and things like that. So do you think it will be a different sort of profession?
Good question. So there is a move towards, you know, psychologists, especially clinical ones, are often regarded as an expensive resource by HR and other departments. But I think once people have worked with clinical psychologists and other professionally qualified psychologists as well, they see the value of that. They see the value of that for teams, and they see the value of that for the clients that we serve. But that's not always necessarily seen in the same way as commissioners, who are like, well, we could get these band 6 members of staff. We could get 3 of those for the price of, you know, probably get 4 of those for a price of an 8B psychologist, you know, if the 8B is at the top of their tree. But, you know, I think there was certainly at one stage a move towards, less trained and less experienced staff. But I hope there will always be a role for professionally qualified psychologists, because I see there's a real value. So, you know, so you are in you know, I guess you're probably 16 or 17 currently. I was a young baby, so I was a June baby. So in your position, I was 16. And I didn't start my qualification. I didn't start my training until I was 27, and I graduated age 30. So, you know, you've got perhaps 14-ish years. You'll probably get there quicker than me. I went off traveling around the world as well. So I do encourage you to do that too. But you'll probably get there quicker than me. What will mental health services be like in 14 years? I don't know. I really, really hope and pray that there will still be an NHS. So even though I don't work in the NHS, I'm a passionate supporter of it. And I really believe in people having access to free healthcare at the point of delivery. So I would really hope there's still an NHS for you to work in and for clients to serve, Ben.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's sort of all the questions I've got, unless you've got anything else you'd like to say. I think you've answered everything amazingly that I've been.
Oh, thanks, Ben. No, I think we've covered a lot of ground. But how has it been interviewing me? What has it been like for you?
Yeah, it's been good. Yeah, definitely different to anything I've had before. So yeah, I think good experience. Yeah.
I was meaning to drum up some other questions as well, and I will level with you all, dear listeners, that I had a diary malfunction this morning, and Ben very politely sent me a message saying, "Ready when you are." And I saw it. I was like, "Oh man!" So I hadn't even sent you a link to access recording, and I followed you on socials like I said I would, and then I was supposed to drum up some other questions, and I'm so sorry. Busy week, busy minds. But yeah, you did really well with the questions that you brought to me. So thank you again for your time. We had a little bit of a Wi-Fi hiccup, which is why Ben's not on camera, but we're going to get a lovely picture, so you'll be able to see his face. Yes, but thank you so much for your enthusiasm, your intrigue. Wishing you the very best with your A-levels. Do let me know how you get on, and if you need any support or guidance in future.
Thank you. Yeah, Thank you.
Honestly, what a privilege to chat with Ben at this stage of his career. And I'm looking forward to seeing how his career develops and unfolds. If you've got any ideas for podcast episodes that you think would be useful, do please get in contact with me. You can fill in my contact form at www.goodthinkingpsychology.co.uk/podcast. But I hope you found this session useful. And if you would welcome any additional support, do consider the Aspiring Psychologist membership, the Aspiring Psychologist Collective book, and the Clinical Psychologist Collective book too. Right, I will look forward to catching up with you for our next episode of the podcast, which will be coming to you from 6 a.m. on Monday. Otherwise, thank you so much for being part of my world, and I'll catch up with you very soon. Take care.
Reflective accounts of mental health professionals on the way to getting qualified. So many tips and lessons to learn from, so many things that you can try. The Aspiring Psychologist Collective. The Aspiring Psychologist Collective. If you're looking to become a psychologist, then let this be your guide. With this podcast at your side, you'll be on your way to being qualified. It's the Aspiring Psychologist Podcast with Dr. Marianne Trent.